I've seen greatness up close, not from a distance, not through highlights, but standing right there on the floor, feeling it in real time. I've shared the court with players who could change a game in a single possession, guys who didn't just play basketball, they controlled it. And the thing is, greatness isn't always what people think it is. It's not just about numbers or rings or how loud the crowd gets when you score. It's about presence. It's about the pressure you put on the other team the moment you step on the court. There were nights when I walked into a game feeling in control, and then across from me was someone who made me rethink everything. That's how you know you're dealing with something different. I've played against a lot of talent, but only a few players ever gave you that feeling. And today, I'm going to tell you who truly belongs on that list. The first person I want to talk about is Magic Johnson. And if you were around that era, then you already understand what he meant to the game before I even say anything else. Because when I first came into the league, Magic wasn't just another great player. He was the standard. He was a guy everyone measured themselves against. And stepping onto the court with him felt different from the very beginning. Not because of how fast he was or how high he could jump, but because of how much control he had over everything that was happening in the game. And I remember those early matchups where I realized pretty quickly that I wasn't just playing against a player, I was playing against someone who could see the game 2 steps ahead, someone who knew where the ball needed to go before anyone else even recognized the opening. And that kind of awareness forces you to adjust in ways you don't expect, because you can't rely on instinct alone. You have to think, you have to anticipate. And that's where he put pressure on you without ever having to say a word. And when we met in the finals in 1991, that was the moment everything came together. Because now it wasn't just a matchup, it was a shift in the league itself. And I can still see that sequence in game 2, driving into the lane, switching the ball in midair, finishing on the other side. And people remember the move, but what they don't always understand is what it represented. It was about adapting in real time, about responding to a player who made you raise your level just to stay in the game. And that's what Magic did every single night. He elevated everyone around him. He controlled the tempo. He made the game easier for his teammates and harder for you at the same time. And that combination is rare because a lot of players can dominate individually, but very few can dominate the entire structure of the game the way he did. And that's when I understood that greatness wasn't just about putting points on the board. It was about dictating everything that happened once the game started. And that's why he'll always be on my list. The next name I have to bring up is Larry Bird, because if Magic controlled the game with rhythm and vision, then Bird controlled it with his mind. And the first time I really went up against him, I understood right away that I wasn't dealing with a typical player. I was dealing with someone who already knew what was going to happen before the play even unfolded. And that's a different kind of pressure, because you can't speed him up. You can't shake him mentally. And even when I had nights where everything felt right, where I was scoring, attacking, doing what I do, he was still there, calm, reading every movement, waiting for the exact moment to respond. And I think back to that playoff series in 1986 when I dropped 63 points against Boston, a game people still talk about. But what stood out to me wasn't just the scoring. It was the fact that even in that moment, even in a game where I felt unstoppable, Bird never lost control of the situation. He stayed composed. He stayed confident. And after the game, when he said it felt like I was God disguised as a basketball player, people remember the quote, but what they don't always see is the respect behind it, because he understood what it takes to perform at that level. And I understood what it takes to think the game the way he did. And that's what made him different. He didn't rely on speed or athleticism. He relied on timing, anticipation, and a level of confidence that never wavered. And there were moments when you felt like you were right there with him, and then suddenly he hits a shot, makes a pass, or positions himself in a way that reminds you he's still one step ahead. And that's the kind of greatness that doesn't always show up in the numbers, but shows up in the outcome of the game, because he dictated how things unfolded without forcing anything. And when you play against someone like that, you realize very quickly that beating them isn't just about playing harder. It's about thinking differently. And that's what he forced me to do. And that's why he'll always be on my list. Another player who belongs on this list is Kobe Bryant. And what makes this one different is that with Kobe, I didn't just see greatness from across the court. I saw it in the way he approached the game every single day. Because the first time I really spent time around him, I could tell right away. There was something familiar about his mindset, the way he asked questions, the way he studied every detail, the way he wasn't satisfied with just being good. And when we shared the floor in those All-Star games, you could feel that he wasn't there just to be part of the moment. He was there to test himself against everyone in the building. And that's a different kind of mentality because most players at that stage are enjoying the experience. But Kobe was competing even in a setting where the stakes weren't supposed to feel that high. And I remember watching him take the same shots, make the same moves, carry that same confidence, not because he was copying anyone, but because he understood what it took to reach that level. And he was willing to push himself through whatever it required. And there were moments when you could see that edge, that refusal to back down, that willingness to take the toughest shot in the toughest situation. And that's where greatness starts to separate itself because it's not just about talent, it's about obsession. It's about how far you're willing to go mentally when everything is on the line. And Kobe lived in that space. He embraced that pressure instead of avoiding it. And when you watched him over the years, winning championships, carrying that responsibility, you could see that same mindset evolve into something uniquely his own because he wasn't trying to be anyone else. He was building his own path with that same intensity. And that's what I respected the most, not just the results, but the approach, the discipline, the consistency, and the fact that every time he stepped on the court, you knew exactly what he was bringing with him. And that kind of commitment is rare because not everyone is willing to go that far. And that's why he'll always be on my list. Then there's someone you simply can't ignore, Shaquille O'Neal, because with Shaq, the game felt different from the moment he stepped on the floor. And the first time I really saw him up close, it was clear that this wasn't just another dominant player. This was a presence that changed everything about how you had to approach the game because you can prepare for speed, you can prepare for skill, but it's a different challenge when you're dealing with someone who can control the entire paint just by being there. And I remember those moments in the mid-1990s, especially when I came back and faced that Orlando team, and you could feel immediately how much attention he demanded, not just from one defender, but from an entire defense that had to adjust every possession. And that's pressure in a different form because even when he didn't have the ball, you were already reacting to him, already shifting your position, already thinking about how to contain something that wasn't easy to contain. And there was a sequence in that playoff series where you could see it clearly, the way he established position, the way he finished through contact, the way he forced the defense to collapse. And suddenly the entire structure of the game changed around him. And that's what made him special because dominance like that isn't just physical. It's psychological. It wears you down over time. It forces you to play a different game than the one you're comfortable with. And a lot of players can score. A lot of players can take over stretches, but very few can reshape the entire game just by stepping on the court. And that's what Shaq did at his best. He dictated how you had to play. He dictated your strategy. And when someone has that kind of impact, you don't ignore it, you respect it because you know exactly how difficult it is to deal with. And that's why he'll always be on my list. And finally, I have to talk about LeBron James because even though we didn't share the same era on the court, you can still recognize greatness when you see it. And the first time I really paid attention to his game, what stood out wasn't just the physical ability, it was how complete he was from the start, how he could impact every part of the game without forcing anything. And that's not something you see often because most players develop one strength and build from there. But with him, it felt like he understood the full picture early on. And as his career progressed, you could see how he controlled the pace of the game in his own way, how he made the right decisions consistently, and how he elevated the players around him. by putting them in positions to succeed. And I think about that finals run in 2016, coming back from 3-1 against a team that had already proven how strong they were. And that kind of moment tells you everything you need to know about a player, because it's not just about talent at that point. It's about resilience, about leadership, about the ability to stay composed when everything is stacked against you. And that's where greatness shows itself in a different form, because it's not always about dominating every possession. Sometimes it's about controlling the flow of the game over time, making the right play again and again until the result shifts in your favor. And that takes a different kind of discipline, a different kind of understanding of the game. And when you watch him over the years, adapting, evolving, maintaining that level for as long as he has, you start to see that his path isn't a copy of anything that came before. It's something he built on his own, with his own style, his own approach. And that's what makes him stand out. Because greatness isn't always about following the same blueprint. Sometimes it's about creating a new one. And that's why he'll always be on my list. Looking at all these names together, what stands out to me isn't just what they achieved, it's how different each of them was in the way they define greatness. Because when you talk about Magic Johnson, you're talking about control, about a player who could walk into any game and dictate the tempo from the very first possession. And then you look at Larry Bird, and that's a different kind of greatness, one built on intelligence, anticipation, and a mindset that stayed one step ahead no matter the situation. And with Kobe Bryant, it becomes about obsession, about a level of commitment and focus that pushed him to embrace pressure instead of avoiding it. And then there's Shaquille O'Neal, where greatness shows up as dominance, the kind that forces an entire team to change the way they play just to deal with one presence on the floor. And finally, when you think about LeBron James, you're looking at evolution, a player who expanded what it means to impact the game by doing everything at a high level for a long period of time. And when you put all of that together, you start to understand that greatness isn't one thing. It's not a single definition or a single path. It's impact, it's presence, it's the pressure you create every time you step on the court. And every one of these players brought that in their own way, and that's why they belong here. Not because they're the same, but because they're not. And that's what makes this conversation real, because there's no perfect answer, only different ways to define what greatness really looks like. So now I've told you my list. What does yours look like